Welcome back to Chat Like a Native. If you have ever been in the middle of a conversation, especially in a language you're actively learning, and suddenly your mind just goes completely blank, well, this session is entirely for you.
Oh, absolutely. It happens to everyone.
It really does. I
Hmm.
mean, by the end of our time today, you're going to learn exactly how to stop freezing during those crucial high-pressure moments and instead start leading conversations naturally. And the absolute best part, you don't need a massive dictionary-level vocabulary to do it.
Right, which is such a relief.
Exactly. You don't need flawless textbook grammar either. What we're uncovering today is a complete perspective shift. Because controlling a conversation, it doesn't come from having all the brilliant, witty answers ready to fire off.
No, not at all.
Control actually comes from asking the right questions. Questions are the ultimate tool.
Yeah.
They guide a conversation's direction, they dictate the time you have to think, and they forge the genuine connection you build with the other person.
They're incredibly powerful.
They really are. And to make this strategy impossible to forget, we have a punchy, highly effective mnemonic for you. The NRA formula. That stands for Notice, React, Ask. Remembering NRA is your absolute secret to never running out of things to say.
I am so thrilled we're leading with that because the NRA formula is really the anchor for everything we're going to discuss today. And welcome, everyone.
Great to have you here.
That pattern, notice, react, ask it, just brings this incredibly calm, grounded energy to any interaction. It completely replaces the sheer visceral panic of trying to figure out what to say next with reliable, repeatable structure that you can just lean on in any context.
Okay, let's unpack this because before we get to the actual tools and tactics,
Yeah.
we really need to dismantle the underlying mindset that makes talking so stressful in the first place.
Right, the root of the problem.
Yeah, there is this heavy, unspoken assumption that to be considered quote-unquote good at conversation, you have to treat it like a solo theatrical performance.
A solo theatrical performance is a really accurate way to visualize that pressure.
You feel like you're standing alone on a stage, this harsh spotlight is hitting your face, and you must deliver this flawless, uninterrupted monologue.
Oh, it's terrifying.
It is. You feel this immense pressure to use multi-syllable vocabulary, and you feel like you need to have these long, complex, fully formed opinions ready to go on absolutely any topic someone might bring up. It's exhausting just thinking about the mental gymnastics required for that.
And that exhaustion, frankly, is the root cause of the freezing. I mean, think about the physical and cognitive toll of that performance.
It's huge.
When you're constantly searching your brain for big, complicated words or trying to construct perfectly conjugated grammatical structures in your head before you even open your mouth, you create a mental traffic jam.
It's a traffic jam, right?
Exactly. That frantic search creates a delay in your response. That delay creates a spike of cortisol, which is immense internal stress. And stress in a social situation almost always results in dead, awkward silence.
But here's where I want to push back a little bit.
Sure, go for it.
If you drop the theatrical performance entirely and you're just relying on asking questions instead, aren't you essentially just deflecting? Like, aren't you basically hiding your own lack of fluency by making the other person do all the heavy conversational lifting?
What's fascinating here is that our culture often equates asking questions with passivity or even a lack of knowledge.
Right, like you have nothing to contribute.
Exactly. But in reality, it is a highly active strategic move. When you ask a question, you are fundamentally shifting the goal of the interaction. You move away from the exhausting goal of, I need to impress this person, to the much warmer goal of, I want to connect with this person.
Oh, I see.
And frankly, human beings are wired to prefer connection over being impressed.
So it's not an evasion tactic at all. It's more of a steering mechanism.
Precisely. Questions give you direct, invisible control over 5 crucial elements of any dialogue. First, they control direction. If you don't know the vocabulary for politics, you can steer the talk toward travel, food, or a hobby. Somewhere you feel secure.
That makes a lot of sense.
Second, they control time. A well-placed question buys you precious breathing space when your brain needs a moment to catch up. Third is focus. You take that harsh, glaring spotlight off yourself and shine it onto the shared topic, or directly onto the other person.
Which would instantly lower your heart rate because you're no longer the one being scrutinized.
It drops your heart rate significantly. Fourth, questions control energy. A thoughtful inquiry injects life and momentum into a stagnant chat. And fifth, they control connection.
Connection, right?
People universally love feeling heard. When you ask about their perspective, they become noticeably warmer and way more forgiving of any linguistic mistakes you might make.
Here's where it gets really interesting, because we're not just talking about vague, feel-good ideas here. We actually have a tangible toolkit.
We do.
But instead of visualizing it like a Swiss Army knife, which feels a bit disconnected, I think it's much more accurate to compare conversational tools to the transmission of a manual car. You need different gears for different speeds and terrains.
That is a brilliant way to frame it. You certainly cannot start a car in fourth gear, and you really can't drive on the highway in first gear. Not all questions serve the same mechanical purpose.
Let's map this onto a real-world scenario. Imagine you're at a Friday afternoon networking event. You're standing in a circle of people, the energy is a bit stiff, and you just need to get the car moving. You need first gear.
Your first gear consists of start questions. These are your foundational icebreakers, but the key mechanism here is that they must be exceptionally low pressure.
So, no asking for a life philosophy.
Right. You ask things like, how do you know the host? Or, what's keeping you busy this week? They're open-ended enough to invite a real answer, but simple enough that the other person doesn't have to overthink their response. It just gets the wheels rolling.
Once you're rolling, you need to build momentum. You have to shift into second gear.
And second gear is where true fluency lives. Follow-up questions. If someone tells you a fact, you don't just nod and wait for your turn to speak.
Right, you dig in.
You ask, what happened next? Or, why did you choose that path? Or what was the hardest part about that? Psychologically, this proves you are actively processing their words. It transforms a sterile exchange of facts into a living, breathing narrative.
Now, what about the dashboard of the car? Checking your mirrors, making sure you actually know where you're going. This brings up clarifying questions. Now, I suspect a lot of people fear these because they think asking what do you mean by that makes them look uneducated or, slow.
Oh, absolutely. It's a huge fear.
But psychologically, doesn't asking for clarification actually stroke the other person's ego?
You hit the nail on the head. We fear looking incompetent, but the speaker experiences something entirely different. When you say, wait, I want to make sure I understand, are you saying the policy changed last week?
Mm-hmm.
You are signaling that their words are highly valuable.
You're positioning them as the expert.
Yes. It is a sign of deep, committed engagement, not a red flag that your language skills are weak. People love to explain things they know well.
That is such a vital reframe. Asking for clarification is actually a compliment to the speaker. Okay, so what happens when you hit a dead end? The current topic is exhausted, or maybe it wandered into a highly technical vocabulary area that you simply do not possess. You need to shift gears without stalling the car.
This is where you engage the clutch. Bridge questions. These allow you to smoothly shift the trajectory without any awkward, jarring jumps.
How does those sound?
You use phrases like, speaking of travel, have you ever been to the southern coast? Or, that actually reminds me of something. Do you prefer working from the office or at home?
Oh, I see the mechanism there. So instead of awkwardly changing the subject out of nowhere, you're listening for one single word they just used.
Exactly.
And you're using that word to build a pontoon bridge to a topic you actually know the vocabulary for.
That is exactly how the mechanism works. It feels completely organic to the listener, but it is highly strategic for you. Once you've bridged to comfortable territory, you can hit the accelerator to bring up the room's energy. Those are your opinion questions.
Like asking for their thoughts.
Right. What do you think about that? Or would you have handled it the same way? You transition from trading dry facts to sharing personal feelings, which inherently carries more energy.
But what if the engine stalls completely? You're staring at each other, the silence is stretching out, and the panic is rising.
You pull the emergency brake or grab the jumper cables. Resty questions. When the energy drops, you deploy a total reset.
For example.
Anyway, what are you looking forward to this weekend?
It acknowledges the previous topic is dead by using the word anyway, and it safely restarts the flow on a universally easy subject without any lingering awkwardness.
Okay, so we have this incredible transmission system.
Yeah.
But having the gears is useless if you grind them horribly. And this brings up a massive pitfall.
The interviewer trap. Yes. If you just fire off questions mechanically, you can accidentally turn a friendly chat into a cold, intense police interrogation. I always picture it like a tennis match. If only one person is hitting the ball over the net and the other person is just standing there getting pelted by tennis balls, the game stops being fun very quickly.
It is incredibly common, especially when people are nervous and just want to keep the other person talking at all costs.
Let's actually role play this so we can hear the difference. I'll be the nervous language learner who is just firing tennis balls. What kind of music do you like?
Oh, I really love jazz.
How did you get into that?
My dad used to play it in the house.
Who is your favorite artist?
Pause ones. Probably Miles Davis.
It is exhausting. It feels so rapid fire. There is absolutely no breathing room. How do we fix that?
This is exactly where we bring back our opening mnemonic. The NRA loop. Notice, react, ask. The absolute key to avoiding that interrogation vibe is the middle step, the reaction phase.
Because in the bad example, I skipped the reaction entirely. Walk me through the mechanics of that reaction phase. Why does it change the dynamic so drastically?
Let's run the loop properly. You ask, you listen, you react, and then you ask again. So they say they love jazz. You react. Oh, nice. That's interesting. I've been trying to listen to more jazz recently. And then you ask, how did you get into that?
Ah, I hear it. That tiny little buffer changes the entire rhythm.
It does, and there is a neurological reason for it. When you offer a reaction, even an incredibly brief one, like, no way, or that sounds tough, or I know exactly what you mean, you are signaling safety to the speaker's brain.
So you're validating them.
Yes, you are validating their existence and their contribution before demanding more information from them. You are giving a little piece of your own humanity and then inviting them to continue.
And practically speaking, that brief reaction gives the learner's brain a microsecond to process the language before having to formulate the next inquiry. Are there certain types of questions we should avoid stringing together in this loop?
Yes. You must be highly vigilant about closed questions, the ones that yield dry yes or no answers. If you ask, did you like the movie? They say yes.
Right.
If you follow up with, was it long? They say a little. The conversation becomes incredibly rigid and heavy. You have to consciously mix those with open questions, like, what stood out to you about the movie?
So we have the gears, we have the NRA execution pattern, but let's get real for a second and address the visceral internal panic. What happens when you're in the conversation, you're utilizing the loop, but the other person suddenly speaks at 1,000,000 miles an hour?
Or they use highly specific regional slang.
Exactly. What happens when you just didn't catch every word and you feel totally helplessly left behind?
It is a terrifying feeling. The ground drops out from under you.
It really does.
Yeah.
And the overwhelming temptation in that exact moment is to just plaster a fake smile on your face, nod enthusiastically, and pretend you understand everything perfectly.
Which is an incredibly dangerous game to play. Because eventually, within a few sentences, they will ask you a question based on what they just said, and your cover is completely blown. The awkwardness of getting caught faking it is 100 times worse than asking for help.
So what is the tactical defense against that overwhelming flood of vocabulary?
The primary defense mechanism is to abandon the goal of translating every single word. That is a classroom habit that will destroy you in the real world. Instead, you deploy the keyword strategy. You only listen for the nouns and the verbs that carry the actual weight of the sentence.
Keywords. Meaning what, exactly? Let's say someone talks for 30 seconds straight.
Let's say they deliver a massive, fast-paced paragraph, and out of all that noise, the only words your brain actually successfully registers are Madrid, new job, and customer.
But wait, this is where I get skeptical. If I only catch Madrid and customer, and I confidently ask, how was Madrid? What if the person was actually saying their biggest customer just tragically died in Madrid? Isn't guessing based on 3 isolated words a massive, potentially embarrassing gamble?
That is a very fair challenge. If you only look at the words as data on a page, yes, it is a gamble. But in a real face-to-face interaction, you are not just reading data, you are reading the music. You have context, tone of voice, and body language.
Oh, right.
If their customer died in Madrid, their face is going to look somber, their shoulders will be slumped, and their tone will be heavy.
So you're reading the human, not just the vocabulary.
Exactly. If they are smiling and energetic, you know Madrid and customer are positive keywords. From those 3 words in a positive tone, you can safely ask, how is the new job going? Or what happened with the customer? You do not need full 100% comprehension to stay involved.
Just enough to keep going.
Right. You only need enough situational awareness to ask one useful next question.
That takes a staggering amount of pressure off. You just grab onto one floating piece of debris and pull yourself up onto it. But what if they ask you a direct question and your brain is still translating the first half of their sentence?
You use phrases specifically designed to actively buy time. You do not have to freeze in deer in the headlights silence. You can calmly say, that's a really good question. Pause ones. Let me think about that. What do you think? Or, that is an interesting point. What made you ask that specifically?
You are just lobbing the tennis ball high into the air, buying yourself 5 seconds to catch your breath while they talk again.
You are managing the pacing. And if you genuinely lose the thread, do not fake the smile. Use a phrase to naturally catch up. Say, wait, I missed that last part. What happened there? Or, sorry, can you go back for a second? The connection in my brain just dropped.
Saying the connection in my brain just dropped actually sounds really confident, like
Yeah.
you are taking charge of the interaction instead of being a victim of it.
It is highly confident. A short silence or confidently asking someone to repeat themselves is not a social disaster. It is entirely normal human communication. Panic is the real enemy. If you stay calm, rely on your keywords, and use your buying time phrases, you are never truly lost.
So what does this all mean? When we put all of this together, the shift away from the theatrical performance, the car transmission toolkit, the NRA loop, the keyword strategy, it feels like we are completely redefining what fluency and confidence actually look like in practice.
We really are.
Because normally we picture the most confident person in a room as the one talking the loudest, speaking the fastest, and holding court with massive vocabulary words.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, that loud, fast talker is rarely the best conversationalist.
Yeah,
They are often just the most self-centered.
really.
Yeah. The ultimate secret here is that true confidence does not sound like a loud, impressive monologue. True confidence sounds like genuine curiosity.
Curiosity over vocabulary.
Exactly. When you are genuinely curious, your entire internal dynamic shifts. You stop focusing on yourself. You stop agonizing over your potential grammar mistakes or worrying if your accent sounds strange or stressing about whether you use the right preposition.
Because you're focused on them.
All that internal destructive noise fades away because your cognitive focus is entirely directed outward at the other person.
You are quite literally too busy wondering about their life to worry about your own performance.
Consider the alternative. If you are focused on yourself, you miss everything. But if you are curious, you become the person who notices the small details. Leading a conversation does not mean dominating the airtime. It means you are the architect of the discussion.
Give me an example of noticing a detail as the architect.
Imagine someone casually mentions in passing, yeah, the commute is tough now, but I used to live near the sea, so I'm used to driving. A self-focused person ignores that and waits to talk about their own commute.
Right, waiting for their turn to speak.
But a curious person notices it. They pull on that specific thread. Wait, you live near the sea? What was that like? Do you miss the water? Would you ever move back? You take one tiny discarded detail and you build an entire rich conversation path from it.
That's amazing.
That is what true conversational leadership looks like. You aren't forcing anyone down a rigid path. You are just paving the road as they naturally walk.
You are paving the road as they walk. That is a phenomenal visual. So, to recap our session today.
Yeah.
You do not need to, quote-unquote, win a conversation. You do not need to be the funniest, smartest, or fastest speaker in the room to leave a lasting impression.
Definitely not.
You simply need a reliable way to stay in the interaction. And strategic questions are your best tool for that. Remember your gears, from start questions to get rolling, all the way to rescue questions when the engine stalls. Don't be afraid to ask clarifying questions to stroke the speaker's ego.
Absolutely.
And when in doubt, when the panic starts to rise, always fall back on the NRA formula. Notice, react, ask. That tiny reaction buffer is the key to psychological safety.
And, to leave you with one final thought to mull over, the next time you are at a social gathering or a networking event or even just the standard team meeting, I want you to take a deliberate step back and silently observe the room. Find the person everyone seems most naturally drawn to, the most charismatic, well-liked person in the group. Pay close attention to their actual word count. You might be shocked to discover that they're actually speaking the least. They aren't delivering monologues. They are simply asking the best questions.
What a brilliant observation to look out for. Thank you all so much for joining us for this conversation. The next time you speak, take the pressure off yourself. Drop the solo theatrical performance, embrace your natural curiosity, and just see where the questions lead you.